When I was a kid, I was really into creative things, the arts, and movies and television and music. And then I got into wrestling as well, probably around 8 years old or so. But I remember going to like the library and looking up all these books about movies from the 40s and 50s, Tarzan and Buck Rogers and Dale Evans and Roy Rogers, all those type of people, and just getting really involved in that. I loved Star Trek, I loved Star Wars, and then I discovered the Beatles. I became obsessed with the Beatles, obsessed with the whole pop culture of the 60s and the whole kind of history of rock and roll, you know what I mean? So that's when I became really into, got really into music. And then my grandmother used to really watch a lot of wrestling, so I used to get into wrestling too. Watch it with her, get involved in the characters and the storylines and all that sort of stuff. So I decided it from a very early age that, man, every kid has a dream, and I think at one point I thought it'd be cool to be an archaeologist because I was really into Indiana Jones and all that. I think a Secret Service agent when Ronald Reagan was almost assassinated, because I thought that would be cool. But then when I started thinking about how it would be to be a musician, that really got to me. I used to draw comics about bands and about musicians, and I had this band called the Mr. Rogers Band, which was this fictional band where there was like 8 or 9 guys in it. And then I would do movies based on their, have their adventures, kind of based on the Beatles, how the Beatles had movies based on their adventures. So it was always music, and then kind of drifted back into wrestling again when I started really kind of checking that out. I thought, well, I really think it'd be cool to be a wrestler, and I think it'd be really cool to play in a rock and roll band. How do you do that when you're 12 years old, growing up in small town Canada? I'm not really sure, but I kind of just took those two ideas of the things I wanted to do and kind of tucked them into my psyche. And then as I went through junior high school and high school, constantly strived towards that. I started playing in bands when I was 12, played in junior high school bands, played in the high school bands, did the parties and garage, playing in the garage and doing, bar shows and what they used to call them, teenage nightclub shows, battle of the bands, all that sort of thing. And then while I was doing that with my band, I also had, I guess you'd call them backyard wrestling leagues now, but it wasn't like that. It was more of just a high school gymnasium wrestling league with me and one other guy that we created all of these characters. It was called the BTWF, the Big Time Wrestling Federation. And then we would meet every Wednesday night and have matches. We'd make up the card, and I played 10 guys and he played 10 guys because we were total schizos, and set up the big giant, I don't know what you call them here, but in Canada they're called porta pits, which are big giant gymnastic mats which are about this big, and you can jump on them, and if someone was going to pole vault they might land on that. So we had our whole wrestling company, and then we had our had the band going as well. So I was kind of living that duality right from probably 15, 16 years old. Then I met Jesse the Body Ventura at a random meeting, and he told me if you want to get into wrestling, you should do something to fall back on. So I went to college for a couple of years, and then when I was 19, I moved to Calgary to go to wrestling school because it seemed like there was a lot more of a viable way to try and start it. In Winnipeg at the time, there wasn't much of a music scene. It was like the Crash Test Dummies and the Guess Who were the only 2 bands that ever really came from there. So wrestling went first, but I still always continued to play, still always continued to write songs and do demos. And it's funny for me when people say, wow, it's cool that you're doing Fozzy, and when did you decide to be, to start a band? And it never was that. It's these 2 things that kind of started at the same time and grew at the same time. It's just that one of them took off quicker than the other, but the other one was always there, if not even bigger, always there. So the only thing I can liken it to is if you try to learn Spanish now, it's hard to learn because you know how to speak English. You're 20, 30, 40 years old. You've had this experience. Learning Spanish, you got to start from scratch. But if you're a kid that grows up in a multilingual house where your parents speak English and Spanish, you just grow up with it and it's just natural. I speak English, I speak Spanish. I never really thought about why, I just do. And that's kind of the same thing for me about these 2 dreams, these 2 goals. I had to be a pro wrestler and to be in a rock band. Hey, this is Chris Jericho live in Louisville right here. Big show tonight. You are watching BeliefNet.com. Check it out. Listen to all of my blabbering. I got a really lot of cool stuff to say. And check out Fozzy's new record, Sin and Bones, as well. But more importantly, just love each other.